The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. I was sitting on my bed, still wearing my wig because I'd forgotten to take it off, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom in Manchester. When I saw the unknown number, my heart started pounding in a way it hadn't since the diagnosis. I answered, and the voice on the other end said a sentence that made the glass of water slip out of my hand. "You need to know who Daniel really is." I had no idea what I was about to discover, nor that this single phone call would change everything I believed about love, about money, and about the time I had left. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments which country you're watching from. But to understand that call, I need to go back 6 months. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 68 years old. I taught literature for 32 years at a secondary school just outside Manchester, and I've been a widow for 7. My husband, Thomas, died of a heart attack while watering the roses in our garden. One day he was there, complaining about the football scores. The next, I was choosing a coffin. After that, I got used to silence. It's not dramatic, it's just, the sound of the house changes. You learn to live with the echo of your own footsteps. Then came the diagnosis. Breast cancer, stage 2. The doctor spoke with a professional calm that somehow hurt more than if she'd cried with me. "We have good odds, Margaret, but it's going to be a difficult road." I remember walking out of that office and feeling like my body no longer entirely belonged to me. That week I went through scan after scan. Then came the chemotherapy sessions. I lost my hair in 3 weeks. I lost my appetite. Slowly I lost the will to look at myself in the mirror. My daughter Claire lived in Bristol and called every single day. She worried. I knew that much. But there was something in her voice I couldn't quite place. Almost as if she were more anxious about something else entirely, something beyond my health. I didn't know what it was. Not yet. It was my sister, Diane, who suggested the trip. "You need to get out of this house, Margaret. You need to see something other than these 4 walls and the hospital." She'd seen an advertisement for an organized cruise for people undergoing cancer treatment or in recovery. It was called Second Spring. A cheesy name, I know, but it somehow made me smile for the first time in months. I said no. She insisted. I said no again. On the 3rd phone call, she simply said, "I've already paid for your ticket, Margaret. You're going." And that's how, wig carefully adjusted and wearing a dress I hadn't touched in years, I boarded a ship bound for the Mediterranean coast. I had no idea I was about to meet a man who would change everything. I met Daniel on the 3rd day of the trip. I was sitting alone on the deck, watching the sea, trying to remember what it felt like to feel wind on my face without thinking about nausea or exhaustion. A man approached and asked if he could sit beside me. He looked to be about 30. Dark skin, an easy smile, an accent that mixed Ghana and London in a way I found beautiful. "You look like you're keeping a secret from the ocean," he said. I laughed. It was the first real laugh in months. "I'm just trying to remember who I was before all of this," I answered, touching the scarf on my head. He didn't look away. He didn't do that uncomfortable pause people do when they realize you're sick. "And who were you?" Nobody had asked me that in months. We talked for 2 hours. I learned his name was Daniel Mensah, that he worked in technology, and that he was on the trip because he'd lost his mother to cancer the year before. "I wanted to understand better what she went through," he said, looking at the horizon. "Maybe that's foolish?" "It's not foolish," I said. "It's love, arriving late. Sometimes we only understand people after they're gone." He looked at me differently after that, and I felt something I hadn't felt since Thomas. Curiosity about another person, but I didn't yet know how much that would cost me. Over the following days, Daniel and I became inseparable on the ship. Breakfast together, walks on the deck, conversations until late about books, about loss, about what it means to start over when you think you no longer have the time. He made me laugh in a way I'd forgotten was possible. But there was a problem. He was 30. I was 68. And every time someone on the ship saw us together, I felt the stares, the whispers, the forced smiles of women who asked with cruel delicacy, "And is the young man your nephew?" I said no, and watched the discomfort settle onto their faces. On the night of the 6th day, sitting at the ship's bar, I asked Daniel directly, "Why are you wasting your time with me?" He didn't hesitate. Because you're the first person in years who makes me feel truly heard. I wanted to believe him. But part of me, the part that had lived long enough to distrust things that seemed too good, wondered, what if this is about something else? I came back to Manchester a different woman. My treatment continued, but now I had someone, to think about between sessions. Daniel lived in London, but he started taking the train every week to visit me. He brought flowers. He stayed with me through the chemo sessions, holding my hand when the nausea hit. That's when Claire decided to visit me in person. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon, and the moment she saw Daniel walking out of my kitchen with 2 cups of tea, her face changed completely. "Mom, can I talk to you alone?" We went out to the garden. "Mom, you know what people are saying about this, don't you?" "Saying what, Claire?" "That he's after your money. The house. Dad's inheritance." Something inside me cracked. Not because the idea was new, I'd thought it myself, on the nights when fear spoke louder than hope, but because it came from my own daughter, with such certainty, as if she'd already decided everything on my behalf. "Have you even talked to him, Claire? Asked what he does for a living?" "I don't need to, Mum. It's obvious." That word, obvious, echoed in my head for days. Diane, my sister, started doubting too. "Margaret, you're weak. Vulnerable. Men like that know exactly what they're doing. Men like that, Diane, you don't even know him." "I don't need to know him. I've seen this film before." Every conversation like that left me more isolated, and at the same time, drew me closer to Daniel, because he was the only person who never asked about my will, my house, or what people would think. But somewhere, deep down, one question kept disturbing my sleepless nights. What if they were all right? 3 months after we met, Daniel asked me to be his girlfriend, formally. It was over a simple dinner, in my own kitchen, because I was too weak to go out after a chemo session. He held my hand, looked into my eyes, and said, "Margaret, I know what people are saying. I know it looks like madness, but I don't want you for your house, or your money. I want you for your stories, for your laugh, for the way you still find beauty even while you're sick." I cried, not from sadness, from a mix of gratitude and fear. "And what if I don't have time, Daniel? What if the treatment doesn't work? Then I want to be here for every day that you do have." I said yes. But when I told Claire, she didn't answer my calls for an entire week. The treatment continued. Some scans improved. Others got worse. There were days I could barely get out of bed, and Daniel would simply sit there, reading aloud from the books I'd taught for decades, as if he were trying to give back to me, patiently, everything I'd given my students over a lifetime. On one of those afternoons, he said something that caught me off guard. My mother had breast cancer too. I was 23. I didn't know what to do, so I just stayed. That's all. I stayed. And did it help? She lived 2 years longer than the doctors expected. I like to think company matters more than medicine sometimes. I wondered in that moment if I was some kind of reflection to Daniel, a second chance for him to care for someone he hadn't been able to save before. That didn't frighten me. It made me love him even more. But Claire still knew none of this. And the silence between us was growing heavier by the week. It was on a Tuesday that everything began to collapse. Diane showed up at my house unannounced, holding a folder of papers. "Margaret, I hired a private investigator." I nearly dropped my teacup. "You did what?" "I needed to know who this man really is. And I found things, Margaret." My heart started racing out of control. Not from fear for Daniel, but from an older fear. The fear of discovering that once again, I had trusted the wrong person. "Tell me," I said, my voice shaking. "He has debts, Margaret. Large debts. And guess when they appeared? 8 months ago. Exactly when he started visiting you." I felt the floor disappear beneath me. Every ounce of trust I'd built with Daniel, every night he'd stayed by my side, all of it suddenly felt like a carefully rehearsed performance. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I confronted him. "Do you have debts?" He went silent for a second that felt like an eternity. "Yes," he said, "but it's not what you think." "Then what is it, Daniel?" He took a deep breath. "Margaret, There's something I should have told you a long time ago. My heart stopped, and it was at that exact moment that the phone rang. 11:47 p.m. An unknown number. Somehow I already knew that call was connected to all of this. I answered, my hand trembling. "You need to know who Daniel really is," said the voice on the other end. My blood ran cold. The woman identified herself as Angela, Daniel's business partner at his technology company. "I saw the two of you mentioned on his friend's social media. I needed to speak with you before it was too late." I braced myself for the worst. "Did he tell you about the debts?" she asked. "He told me. He was about to explain when you called." There was a pause on the other end. "Then let me finish the story, because he's too proud to brag about it himself." And that's when everything changed. Angela told me that Daniel's company, a health tech startup he'd founded at 25, had been sold 2 years earlier for a sum that made my head spin. Millions of pounds. He was already a millionaire before he met you, Margaret. Long before. Then why the debts? Because after his mother died, he started a foundation to fund cancer treatment for families who can't afford it. He put almost all of his personal money into it. The debts you heard about are loans he took out against his own assets to keep the foundation running until the next round of donations comes in. I couldn't breathe. He never said a word about any of this to me. He never talks about it to anyone. He's embarrassed it might look like he's showing off. But I couldn't stand watching people say he was only after your money, when he actually has more money than most of the people spreading that gossip. I looked over at Daniel, standing in my bedroom doorway, wearing an expression I'd never seen on him before. Shame. Not for what he'd done, but for having hidden it. After I hung up the phone, we sat in silence for a long time. "Why did you never tell me?" I asked. "Because I wanted you to like me for me, Margaret, not for what I have. But you let everyone believe you were after my inheritance. I let everyone believe whatever they wanted. I only cared about what you thought." I felt torn between anger that he'd hidden something so enormous, and a deep admiration for a man who preferred being misjudged over bragging about his own generosity. "I need some time to process this," I said. He nodded and left without arguing. That night, alone, I stared at my bedroom ceiling and thought about Thomas. I thought about how, sometimes, true love is too quiet to be seen by anyone who's only looking for reasons to doubt it. I called Claire the next day. "Mum, I heard. Diane told me about the call." "And what do you think now, Claire?" There was a long silence. "I think I was so busy trying to protect you that I forgot to actually listen to you." That was the closest thing to an apology Claire had ever given me. "I just wanted you to understand, Mum, that after Dad died, I was afraid of losing you again, in any way at all." I understood in that moment that her fear had never been about Daniel. It had been about me, about the possibility of losing me, to the illness, or to someone who might hurt me. "Claire, I'm afraid too, but I'd rather live out whatever time I have left with hope than die surrounded by suspicion." She cried on the other end of the line, and for the first time in months, I felt truly heard by my own daughter. I invited Daniel to dinner a week later. "I've thought it all through," I said, "and I realized something, Daniel." "What's that?" "The problem was never your age. It was never your money, or the lack of it. The problem was that the people around me had gotten so used to seeing me as fragile, as a potential victim, that they couldn't imagine anyone simply loving me." He took my hand. "And you, Margaret? What do you think?" "I think I spent my whole life teaching my students about love stories in books, and it took me 68 years to live one that actually surprised me. Months later, my scans began showing significant improvement. The doctor said that although there was still a road ahead, the outlook was far more positive than initially expected." "Has something changed in your routine, Margaret?" she asked, looking at the results with a confused, satisfied smile. I looked over at Daniel, sitting in the waiting room, holding a book I'd recommended. "Yes," I said. I found a reason to want to keep going. Claire and Daniel met for lunch, just the two of them, without me. When she called me afterward, her voice was different. "Mum, he showed me the foundation, the paperwork, the families he's already helped." "And?" And I realized I was so busy trying to protect you from an imaginary danger that I nearly pushed you away from one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Diane, too, softened over time. Not overnight. Broken trust doesn't rebuild in an instant. But, little by little at our Sunday dinners, she started laughing at Daniel's jokes, started asking about the foundation, started finally seeing him as a person, not a threat. A year after that 11:47 p.m. phone call, Daniel and I got married in a small ceremony in my garden, the same garden where Thomas used to water the roses. I wore a simple dress. No wig, because my hair had grown back, short and gray, and for the first time in years I felt no shame in it. Claire was my maid of honor. Diane cried more than I did. And when Daniel said his vows, he said something I still carry with me today. I didn't choose Margaret in spite of her age, her illness, or the judgment of people who didn't understand us. I chose Margaret because of who she is, a woman who, even facing the worst moment of her life, still found the courage to believe in something new. Today, 2 years after that diagnosis, my scans remain stable. I don't know how much time I have left. Nobody does, really. Not even the young, not even the healthy. But I've learned something I wish I'd learned decades ago. Love doesn't come with an expiration date or a recommended age chart. It shows up when it shows up, often exactly when we least expect it, and always right when we need it most. The people who claimed they were protecting me were, in truth, trying to protect me from life itself. And if I had listened to every one of them, I would have lost the most beautiful thing that ever happened to me after Thomas died. So if you're going through something similar, if you're being judged for loving someone who doesn't fit what everyone else expects, I only have one thing to say to you. Trust your own story, because in the end, it's the only one that truly matters.